Yes, guys, what's good? Today we are reacting to UFL, their YouTube page. They've got a video called Journey 4 Matchmaking Servers and Metagame. I think we'll all be interested in that. And they've got a Journey 6 closed test, which I haven't seen yet. I have seen the matchmaking one, but I thought I'd react to it on here. See what's going on with UFL, eh? Because I think we're all excited to see what UFL does differently to EA. Yeah, let's get into it. UFL Journey 4 Matchmaking Servers.
Hey, Dima.
Hey.
Today we decided to chat in a more unconventional setting. Wanted to mix things up a bit. Hey, Oleg.
Hey, Tigran.
I'm glad to finally meet you, even if it's remotely. Let's get straight down to business. Please help me understand what the backend is all about so that I and most of our viewers can be brought up to speed on that.
The back-end part of the game deals with serving requests from users in the metagame tier. In other words, the invisible structure of the game.
In our company, the back-end is a set of online services that allow players to interact with each other. It includes matchmaking, finding opponents, and also involves some operations with the metagame.
Lots of things related to club creation, like changing and buying footballers. We also ensure that users find each other to play online matches.
Data storage, data preservation, authorization. In an online mode, the back-end team is responsible for the server's load management. Online games have a massive...
These are all important things, right? Because when you think about EA with the matchmaking, I think this year has been the worst, hasn't it, for matchmaking, especially in champs when it seems they're putting you up against people that have a similar record, whether it's win or losses. So normally, last year it would be if you'd win six, say you win six in a row, you'd then end up going against someone that has six win or close to you as you, like the same as you. But this year you can have six wins in a row and then face someone that has six losses in a row. So yeah.
number of users, so there's a need to store and process an absolutely huge amount of data for all of them. We have to be able to process it flawlessly. So, to sum up, the backend is a set of online services that allow users from all over the world to interact with each other. It also enables manipulations with in-game properties and makes sure that servers can withstand even the heaviest load.
And now a question for you, Dima, that I forgot to mention right at the start. What are the differences between your work, your responsibilities, and Oleg's? How do you two interact together? How do you distribute tasks between the two of you? I think it'll help us all understand the structure of your team better and your answers.
Yes. I'm directly involved in planning the working process and managing the team. I'm responsible for task planning, prioritizing features, synchronizing parallel processes, and it's my responsibility to coordinate our team with producers and game designers from other departments. Namely, I'm the project manager of the backend. That means I work more as the liaison between our team, the other teams, and external processes. I need to ensure our backend team completes the assigned task to a quality level within the time frame and properly coordinated. In contrast, Oleg is a technical expert. He's a game architect. This means that he oversees and controls the development of all the technologies, internal tools, and the mechanics that are created in our department. Oleg and I work together to develop and coordinate different solutions, implement them, and distribute them to other teams. Then, on the other hand, we can also decide when it's time to seek help from the other teams. And then I work to communicate those needs, and we work really closely together.
And you complement each other, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, let's move on to the metagame. Tell us more about how it relates to the back end and how it affects the game.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, The metagame encompasses all the logic behind things like choosing clubs, kits, in-game purchases, and a whole load of other stuff that players will enjoy using in the game.
Stuff such as club customization, stadium settings, team adjustments, selecting kits, choosing specific equipment. That's the metagame.
Interesting. Metagame. Sounds like Ultimate Team, customization, and all that good stuff.
Basically, everything a user would engage in, apart from actually playing a football match, refers
Hello.
to the metagame.
And to explain how this looks from our perspective, as back-end developers, it goes like this. We have clients. We have our back-end that exists somewhere else. Let's call this place the cloud. And within the cloud, there are various services that process the requests made by each client. When a client sends a request to us, we process them. We pack them to the databases, and that means before the next match, the user would be able to use any of their previously saved formations, and on top of that, they wouldn't lose their purchased players or their other properties.
Nice.
The scheme sounds simple, clients and requests. But then there are the implications. There'll be a huge number of players generating a significant load to the game servers, and in designing this system, we took into consideration scalability, use of resources, and so on.
As we're talking about an online game, I have to take this opportunity to ask you about matchmaking in UFL. How does that work? Are there any unique features we can look forward to? Can you let us know anything about that?
Well, matchmaking in an online game, especially in a football simulator like UFL, is one of the most important mechanics. It plays an absolutely pivotal role. And honestly, I'm afraid I can't disclose many details of how the matchmaking works in UFL. But as the term suggests, matchmaking is basically a set of algorithms that make matches between opponents based on some known personal parameters of each player. Those parameters could be positive things, like the player's stats compared to others and their rating in online matches, but at the same time, there are a large number of negative parameters that will also influence the matchmaking. Things like
Player rating compared to others. That would be great. Imagine every time you play the game, you would go up against someone that has a similar team and player rating. That would be nice. Penalties for quitting. This could be great.
penalties for leaving matches and injuries in a player's team. Based on those parameters, a player's weight is calculated and that becomes a baseline. They will parameters, penalties for leaving matches and injuries in a player's team. Based on those parameters, a player's weight is calculated and that becomes a baseline.
Very nice.
They will define what we call a player's weight, and that's what we use for the matchmaking process. We're looking to find the best possible opponent.
Hello.
Another important aspect of matchmaking is geography. By that I mean the actual locations of the player and their opponent.
Right.
Yes, that's right. Of course, we can match them, see how well they play, and define their locations. But there are still factors that could well affect their experience. I'm talking about the type of connection. The first type of connection is peer-to-peer. In other words, when two clients in different places are connected to each other over the internet and communicate with each other. One of them acts as the server, the other as the client. However, there may be a number of issues down to the quality and type of internet connection they are using, and understandably, those issues could give one of the players an advantage. First of all, let's consider the connection at the server's end. If they have a faster connection, they will therefore have a more responsive interface, and therefore their experience will be much better. To solve this issue, we decided we had to start using dedicated servers. That means to start a match, two players will connect as usual, but we don't connect them directly with each other. Instead, we connect both opponents to a separate remote server that we have on our backend.
That sounds good. I'm not sure if EA already do. Is that what the EA server is? I take it. We both connect to EA. We play through their server. Yeah, that must be it. But yeah, this is good anyway. So at least they're matching it.
Going back to the cloud idea, That is our dedicated server hovering in the middle. It's like the hub taking care of all the logic and connection mechanics. And our users connect to this dedicated server and then interact with each other indirectly. This system is much more convenient. For a start, the players will get a significantly better user experience, one that's less dependent on the end user's tech. Besides, our servers will be able to provide a better quality of connection, higher performance rates, and it will help to neutralize any disadvantages and keep the game performance rates, and it will help.
So, advantages of dedicated servers: better connecting for both players. Sorry. And better performance. No unfair advantage for players with faster internet. Right?
to neutralize any disadvantages and keep the game fair.
During my conversations with both you and Oleg, I often hear references to data collection. You mentioned that UFL users will be providing you with some data. Could you please expand on that for us? Clarify what sort of data you need, why it's necessary, and how much personal info you're going to collect and store?
All the data we collect, all possible analytics, are a main tool in allowing us to predict players' behavior. What's more, by using the real data, we can get a clear sense of which mechanics or features work correctly and, likewise, which ones don't.
So basically the data is same as like with EA, they have their pitch notes, but they only do the pitch notes after they receive the data from us, so I guess that's the same thing.
For example, we collect data on how users interact with the metagame aspects, stuff from before the match like their settings, the formations they choose, and so on. And then we collect data about the user's matches after they kick off, how the user plays, how the ball behaves, including things like the number of touches, the player's trajectories, etc. First and foremost, this helps us get a load of data about game balance. That way, we can determine which mechanics are working well and which aren't performing as well as we'd like. Then we can get to work to improve them going forward. It's not about having total control, it's more about improvement. This is one of the few ways we can definitively know how our game is actually working and performing. Analytics also serve to collect technical metrics. I mean, realistically, not everything will always go perfectly in the game. There could be different bugs and issues of all types and varieties. Not all users are going to report an issue when they spot it. Also, it's not always necessary to deal with them through human intervention.
We've been dealing with that for years through EA, haven't we? FIFA, EA FC. There's always bugs.
I'm also interested in the personal side of your work. How do you feel when you're working on UFL? Do you feel like there's a big burden of responsibility? Is there stuff in the game that really stands out for you that you're really proud of? Seems to me users don't normally consider game developers' personal feelings when thinking about that industry.
Well, as I said before, there is a project facade, and then behind that, there's our backyard. I guess it could feel a bit upsetting that users don't see exactly what we do, but then again, we have a large back-end team here, and we get to do a lot of cool stuff. I have to say, it is frustrating sometimes that we manage to create some unique approaches, we solve extremely ambitious challenges, and none of that is visible to the users. They don't even think about what we do when it all works well. Not until something goes wrong and breaks, then they think about us. On the other hand, being anonymous might also be a plus. The aim is that users enjoy the game. Full stop, nothing more.
That is very true, isn't it? I know they aren't EA, but every time something's wrong with EA, and it's a lot, that's why we moan so much. But yeah, you can understand what he's saying there.
And when any problems do occur, they're covered by our team.
As far as I'm concerned, absolutely. Being involved in a AAA project is a mixture of excitement and nerves at the same time. With any new task or feature we add, if we implement a new functionality, add some options, or just polish some older stuff to make it perfect, every single time I think about how it's going to be judged and used by a massive number of people. And while the back end is not visible like other parts of the game, it is still super demanding. Yes, there's a certain burden of responsibility, of course, there's bound to be, but from my perspective, it isn't always hanging heavily on us. Mainly because we consciously try to distract ourselves from it, so it doesn't get in the way of our work. We focus more on delivering good features of great quality and all with the aim of improving the standard of the game as much as we can.
Hello.
What you're talking about suggests there's going to be a heavy load on your online services. Isn't that going to be tricky? How do you deal with that prospect?
Yeah, of course. This is a super tricky issue. Believe me, we're doing everything we can to be prepared. You can't just ignore it. So we conduct a lot of testing, trying to stress our system with the kind of realistic load we're expecting. On top of that, we conduct some high-load testing too. Load testing is one of several procedures that are pretty standard. We do it to check how our system behaves under the load we'd expect from the amount of users we hope to see in UFL when it goes live. And another procedure we perform is stress testing. In this, we try to deliberately overload our system. This is also a standard check, and there are many ways to perform it and get the results you want. We've taken one of the existing solutions and enhanced it, changed it in line with our needs, and created an Autobot. It's a bot designed to simulate user behavior. We can comfortably predict how users will generally behave. Things like which screens they'll access most often, what actions they'll perform, and so on. So we've built up profiles of how users will tend to react. We take that information and put all of it together to create what we call a load profile. Once that's created, we feed it into our Autobot for further analysis. It can replicate the predicted behavior hundreds of thousands of times, and each time it emulates the huge crowds of users. Of course, thanks to this automation, we can easily conduct that kind of test very often, up to several times a week. Every time we observe carefully what happens. If something goes wrong, we fix it. We keep iterating to the point where we are sure that everything in our system is top.
Of course, server overload is, the fact that they're testing it is great. But if this game does end up being like the next best thing in football, soccer, overloads could be a problem. But it sounds like they're testing it. Hopefully, they can get it all right in that.
Top-notch.
That's cool. So rather than sit and wait for any problems to occur, you're simulating with similar loads to unearth them?
Exactly.
Nice.
That's precisely what we'll do. And besides, this way we are preparing standard pipelines of how we should behave if something does go awry after the release, when we'll be on air. Using these established pipelines, we'll be able to fix things while, most likely, users won't notice anything.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time. I've learned a lot today. And of course, I look forward to our next meeting, and we'll prepare some new questions for you when the game is ready for release.
I will happily answer all your questions when we meet again. Thanks.
Cheers,
Goodbye.
mate.
Bye.
Let's discuss your plans going forward, Dima. What's on your team's task list now?
We still have a whole bunch of tasks to get through, and
Future plans. Let's see.
obviously everyone knows the work doesn't stop as soon as the game's released. There are still going to be plenty of tasks for us to tackle. As I mentioned earlier, at the moment we have matchmaking as a big focus in our plans. It's always going to be one of the most significant parts of the game functionality. Right now, we are very much focused on polishing it and, at the same time, adding a few improvements. We're constantly working on enhancing it, working on the user's parameters, those matchmaking weights I talked about earlier. And then, of course, we're currently working on data security and dedicating a significant amount of time to predicting and then dealing with any server load issues. As Oleg mentioned, we're able to regularly conduct the load and overload tests, as well as working on the load models, thanks to our automated testing bots. And unsurprisingly, we still stumble upon the odd issue that needs improving. And that happens in all these systems. So, in answer to your question, our tasks for the future are security, server load, and matchmaking.
Nice.
So it's just the existing mechanics that you're now refining and improving. Everything's already been created, and it just needs to be carefully brought to completion. There's nothing left that you'll be starting from scratch on. Am I right?
Thankfully, yes, you are. For the most part, I'd say we already have all the mechanics for the game pretty much ready to go. Nevertheless, we continue to improve them according to extra requirements from the game designer, as well as, obviously, our own experiments, tests, and conclusions, and keep polishing them to perfection.
Okay. Now, just before we finish, I have a simple question for you, which hopefully has a simple answer. Try not to think about your answer too much, okay? The question is simply, what do you like most about your work? What would you say brings you the most satisfaction?
Working with creative people. You see, when you're making a video game, any kind of video game, it's impossible to be a non-creative person. Impossible. Because of the demands of the work, you always have to evoke emotions, to trigger impacts, to keep the motivation high in your team. So there's your simple answer. For me, personally, I'd say the most important thing is being surrounded by people who are not only creative, but also super professional and who know exactly what they're doing. In case you couldn't tell, I'm really happy to be working in this team and with the guys from the back end.
In other words, what you've done there is prove to anyone out there who thinks that the work in the back end is dry and purely technical stuff that it's
Work in the back end is dry. Leave that with you guys.
nothing like that at all. That's cool.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
I think that's it from us.
Alright. So that's matchmaking, servers, and metagame. Let's go over to... I'll just have a quick recap of that matchmaking, servers, and metagame, shall we? To me, it all sounds good. They're saying the right things. You know, the matchmaking is really positive. The fact that they're gonna do their very look, the whole thing with having a similar rated team and rated players, that would be great. Like, because sometimes some of us like to use like original teams. You know what I mean? Like, and it's amazing. But then you're always going to end up coming up against someone with like a meta squad, high rated, like your Van Dijks and your Blancs, Salah, Son, and all that finesse shots, and you know, yeah. And the servers, they're testing it, make sure it's not getting overloaded and all that. So yeah, I'm happy with what they've just talked about. Alright, Journey 6, closed test. This should be good.
Hi everyone, it's Tigran here from Journey, and today I'm talking to you from Cyprus. It's hot, and we're going to be discussing the hot topic on Journey, the alpha test. In fact, as we speak, the CEO of Strikers, Eugene Nashilov, is preparing for our interview. Today, we're going to learn a lot of interesting stuff that I know you've been waiting for. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave us your comments about what you want to hear or see more of. We read everyone, we listen, and respond as much as possible. Hey.
Hi there.
So I've just said that the long-awaited alpha is on its way. Could you give us some basics first? Like what it is, what it's for, and if you
Just the big boss man CEO.
can, what makes your alpha different from alpha versions of other products? Like, why don't we just release the game without external testing, without any alphas or betas?
Well, firstly, I'd say you don't have to bother with testing. Some teams don't. In fact, many don't. It rather depends on the game. In our case, we're releasing an alpha to get feedback. We actively want our audience, the players, who our game is ultimately aimed at once it's released, we want their feedback on what we've done. We want them to communicate to us the elements they like, the ones they don't like, every aspect of the game.
Gameplay.
So it's really about the core gameplay, the meta gameplay, everything. We consider that feedback extremely important. If I can put it this way, that's our philosophy. The one we pursue and advocate, and we want to stick to it. So that means we're going to be collecting lots of feedback and adjusting and fine-tuning the game off the back of it. So the game appeals to our players and not just us in the development team.
Sorry, 1 second.
Adjusting and...
He has some great socks. That looks like a dinosaur with shades, a joint in his mouth, and a bong.
fine-tuning the game off...
Well, of course, you have to understand, in the alpha test, we'll be testing many things for the very first time. For example, we'll be testing our servers for the first time. We'll be checking our infrastructure for the first time. And we don't know how it'll turn out.
Let's have a look if we can just get to the actual gameplay.
Will have been resolved. But that's regarding the
There we
technical
go.
side. It also applies to different bugs because, after all, even though we test the game internally, we could miss many things because our eyes might be clouded. Maybe we just don't test enough, or don't think the way some players will think.
My official job title is head of publishing. In reality, that means I'm
Alright. Here we go.
That started collecting subscriptions for the alpha and subsequent beta tests. At the moment, we're preparing some NDAs because, for obvious reasons, we need everything to remain more or less confidential, at least for a while. We're also creating questionnaires for the tests, and based on those, we'll conduct our initial interactions with the audience. And in the game code, we will define the events that we'll be tracking. They will enable us to learn how people play, what they do when they're in possession, the different ways they attack and defend, as well as what they do in the meta, which footballers they sign. All this will be in the alpha testing.
Can you tell us how many people are expected to participate in the testing? How many players will be in the alpha, for instance?
Initially, it's going to be quite a small number of people, and the main goal will be to maintain 300 concurrent users. By that, I mean that we want to have 300 people in the game at the same time, all looking for matches to play. I mean, that's the number of users necessary
Oh,
for us
loading
to
screen.
ensure that our matchmaker can quickly build pairs, which will mean that no one has to wait too long for a match.
No QA can provide as much data or find as many.
Right, well.
In game design, there's a classic mistake you always make when you set something up yourself. You work on it for so long, in your own little bubble, that your feedback loop on it kind of gets stuck. Then, to get any sense of what you're trying to achieve, you start turning screws, making the game more complex, more intricate, faster, and so on.
I looked interested to that. I know it's not finished yet, but the way it hits the back of the net.
You work on it for so long, in
What's the
your
way
own
the
little
ball hits
bubble,
the back of the
that
net?
your feedback loop on it kind of gets stuck. Then, to get any sense of what you're trying to achieve, you start turning screws, making the game more complex, more intricate, faster, and so on. What happens? Well, ultimately you end up with a game that's built for yourself, but that nobody else can play. This game is all about the gameplay on the pitch. We must never forget that what we have is a metagame. I won't go into detail here, but in a nutshell, this game is different from all other products in the genre. We've made some decisions within it, and we'll have to wait and see how people react to them.
So why release the alpha now? Why not 3 months ago or in 2 months' time? What influenced your decision to stop at this particular moment and say, we need external opinions? Let's do an alpha test.
First of all, let's be clear, we haven't stopped.
This is a question for all of you. Mike, for you as a game designer, Max as CTO, and you, Eugene, as CEO, is it more important to invite alpha players who have super hardcore experience in all types of football simulation games? Or would you say you're also interested in the more casual player who might log in and play maybe once a week?
For me, I'd say it all depends on the stage you're at in terms of testing. In the early stages, we're bound to attract a fairly core audience. I mean, people who are very active on our resources, who are obviously really looking forward to the game being launched. Later on, we'll expand the audience to get everyone's opinion, but initially, I'd say it's precisely those players you mentioned first, the super hardcore ones, who'll provide us
Most of us know lifers, eh?
with the necessary data and feedback, so we can go in and fix the most obvious, most problematic issues.
I'd agree, but most importantly for me as a publisher, I think we need a core of like-minded people, a core of players who will remain interested in the game and stay with it for a long time. Normally in successful games, those players who participated in alpha testing continue to play for years. I guess they feel comfortable and enthusiastic. That means the main task is to select a group of good testers. The second task is to create a comfortable environment for them in-game, one in which they will continue to be interested and feel comfortable as they test the game.
Example, between dribbling and tackling. Similarly, how can you correctly balance the passing versus, say, the long-distance shot and interception? How do you balance the attack for a shot on goal? A game designer can break down the situation
It
and
doesn't
just
look that
arrange
bad,
a
does it?
one-on-one. For example, a striker up against the goalkeeper, and take hundreds of shots to draw some stats and all that kind of data. But that'll never replace the live game situation, which will always create unexpected events. Honestly, a player will create something that no one, even the designer, would ever think of doing in real life. And all by pressing the same buttons. No game designer is able to take in all the possibilities. That's the whole point of testing on a wider audience.
Now,
Very cool.
obviously, it's important to understand that when we talk about feedback, we're not saying that we're going to ask absolutely everyone about everything they did. So in that example of Mike's, there's absolutely no guarantee that the player will tell us what he did and which buttons he pressed when. What we will do, however, is collect a lot of statistics. So we'll be able to gather tons of analytics, everything from which buttons are pressed, which buttons are not pressed, and when. We'll be able to look at general patterns, and that will enable us to understand what users don't like. Let's say we added a particular feature, but nobody's using it. The alpha testing will let us find out about things like that and fix them before the release.
As things stand, we don't know for sure how our player audience will be distributed around the world. Well, let's be honest, the planet is big.
Happy with them. We've made loads of different iterations. I have to say, it already works pretty well, and it's done in a way that allows you to configure it. But how do we ultimately configure it? How should it look in the end? And how should it work within the game context? So many questions. Also, we have what amounts to a pretty complicated geometry of on-the-fly passes. It's important to consider where the opponent is standing so that you're able to pass the ball around them to your teammate. It's these sort of aspects that we still need to balance and fine-tune thoroughly.
A football match simulator is just that, a simulator.
Right, it's looking good so far.
Down the ramp, and for the
But
pitch to be
obviously, it's still a
certified,
work in
the
progress.
ball has to travel a certain distance across the pitch within a certain range. Referring to those strict physical data points, I set up the ball using the same parameters in the game, but it didn't turn out well. Everything looked too sluggish. It's clear to me that a significant part of the tuning is down to trying to capture and deliver the right feeling of dynamics. This isn't a value you can determine through strict physical parameters.
Wow, but in your opinion, all three of you, do you think it's even possible to find a balance between arcade and realism that would actually satisfy everyone?
I think the answer here is...
In a word, no.
No.
That'll be a no then. It's not possible. And speaking as a layman, I'd agree. Cool. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'd say ideal balance in MMO games is mathematically unattainable with real time and real money. But by the end of the universe, who knows?
Your alpha tests have now started. They're ongoing. And that means that you're receiving information and collecting telemetry.
Alright guys, I thought there'd be a bit more gameplay in that one, but no, it doesn't seem like it. But I do like what they're saying. It is looking good. Alright, yeah. Alright, my overall thoughts are that it's obviously still a work in progress, and I've said that like 5 times, but it is. Everything they're saying about how to with the matchmaking and that, I really like that. The servers and the meta game. Yeah, it does look good. Just have to wait and see what it actually comes out like. If they do release any more videos, I'll react to them as well. Just seen this one, hashtag United Arena in UFL. Boy. Wish list now. Is that Ronaldo? Let's have a look at this.
What a perfect strike!
See! Alright, Cristiano Ronaldo. Alright guys, so yeah. If you did enjoy this sort of video, I'll react to some more. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you did enjoy, please drop a like and a sub would be amazing. Cheers.